Democrats distanced themselves from a professor they celebrated 5 years ago. New video tonight reinforcing this week's storyline about what's being described as the unbridled arrogance and condescension of one of the architects of President Obama's health care reform law. And it's not just Republicans grumbling about the repeated statements of MIT economics professor Johnathan Gruber. These years-old assertions from Gruber causing big problems for the president right now.
Another shocking new remark from Johnathan Gruber. In this one, he points out what he believes is the key to the passage of Obamacare in Massachusetts.
The dirty secret in Massachusetts is the feds paid for our bill. Okay? In Massachusetts, we had a very powerful senator you may know named Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy and smart people in Massachusetts had basically figured out a way to sort of rip off the feds for about $400 million a year.
When then Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney signed that state's health care legislation into law, he thanked Johnathan Gruber.
Johnathan Gruber at MIT devoted hours and hours to an essential econometric model.
Well, how does a nerd get in a game like this through numbers?
Having designed the theoretical computer model that made health care fiscally possible in Massachusetts, soon Connecticut, Delaware, Kansas, Oregon, and other states came calling.
Almost immediately, I was called by Governor Schwarzenegger's office in California. I spent the next year trying to do the same plan in California.
Among his fans, a young senator named Barack Obama. One meeting led to another. Before long, Obama was elected president, and Gruber was summoned to the Oval Office.
Obama realized that if he was going to start to tackle the deficit, start tackling these problems, he had to take on health care costs, and that this law could be the vehicle for doing so.
But Gruber knew, just as Mitt Romney did, that the Massachusetts model wouldn't work nationally. Massachusetts had extra money to pay for it, secured by its influential senator, Ted Kennedy.
Ted Kennedy, who'd been delivering about $400 million a year in slush funds to our safety net hospitals, that the Bush administration was threatening to take away. The Romney administration, to their credit, went to Washington and said, can we keep this money if we use it to cover the uninsured? And the Bush administration, to their credit, said yes.
Gruber also knew that the only way his model could work nationally was through mandates. To many Americans, the idea of mandates, of taxes to pay for Obamacare, was toxic.
Now to the president's people and how they're handling this mess, and a clear effort to get as far away from Johnathan Gruber as possible.
Republicans back home stepped up their attacks over Johnathan Gruber's comments, charging it's a glaring example of an executive branch out of control.
What this insider saying confirms that they were spinning tales from beginning to end because they knew they couldn't tell the truth about Obamacare and have a chance of passing it, even with its Democratic Senate with 60 votes.
From Capitol Hill to Napata, Burma, Democrats today struggled to push back on the firestorm, with the president's spokesman actually trying to shift blame to the GOP.
Well, it is Republicans who have been less than forthright and transparent about what their proposed changes to the Affordable Care Act would do in terms of the choices that are available to middle-class families.
Except it was Gruber, an architect of the president's health law, who said the opposite.
The lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass.
House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, who famously said you needed to pass the bill to find out what's in it, today tried to say she knew nothing about Gruber.
I don't know who he is. He didn't help write our bill. And so, with all due respect to your question, you have a person who wasn't writing our bill commenting on what was going on when we were writing the bill, who has withdrawn some of the statements that he made. So let's put him aside.
One little problem. Pelosi seemed intimately familiar with Gruber in 2009 when she was selling the bill's benefits.
I don't know if you have seen Johnathan Gruber of MIT's analysis of what the comparison is to the status quo versus what will happen in our bill for those who seek insurance within the exchange. And our bill takes down those costs.
Now Democrats are running from Gruber.
To suggest that voters are stupid and that's how you passed it, you don't feel bad about that at all?
I disagree vigorously with that assessment, I think is what I would say. I think the fact of the matter is this was a very difficult undertaking, but ultimately this is a law that has had significant benefits for millions of people.
Republicans counter the ends do not justify the means.
I expect that we're going to strip out the most damaging parts of the health care law, focus on things that have already passed the House with bipartisan support, support the employer mandate, get rid of that, focus and try to eliminate the individual mandate.
Another architect of the law, former HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, ducked a question today about Gruber.
You could talk to Dr. Gruber about what he said, but I don't have a comment about his comments.
As for Pelosi, her staff insists Gruber did not help write the law, even though she and others praised his work.
Obamacare architect Johnathan Gruber apparently does not think too highly of American voters, saying repeatedly, "Your stupidity is the only reason the law he helped craft was able to pass." We feel this is something our viewers deserve to know. The three broadcast networks apparently disagree, despite this story growing throughout the week as more and more clips of Gruber surfaced, showing him essentially bragging about fooling Americans. CBS did not cover the story until this morning. Neither ABC nor NBC have mentioned it at all. The conservative website Newsbusters notes the New York Times, USA Today, the Los Angeles Times, and the Associated Press have also avoided the story. Quote, "The national media have largely reacted to the Gruber story like it is a virus that should be carefully quarantined."
And Obama's like, well, you know, I mean, he's really a realistic guy. He's like, look, I can't just do this. He said, it's just not going to happen politically. The bill will not pass. How do we manage to get there through phase-ins and other things? And we talked about it.
Lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, you know, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever.
They knew they couldn't tell the truth about Obamacare and have a chance of passing it, even with its Democratic Senate with 60 votes.
I think the fact of the matter is
the academic culture that is the incubator of the progressive spirit in this country. He's arrogant, he's condescending, and he's not just indifferent to, he's actually hostile to the ethics of democratic deliberation. But more than that, they would understand the long pedigree of what he just said. He was channeling Herbert Crowley, who 104 years ago, as he was becoming the founding editor of the New Republic magazine, which is to this day a beacon of progressive thought, he published a book called The Promise of American Life. And in it he said the following: "The average American individual is morally and intellectually inadequate to a serious and consistent conception of his responsibilities," which is why progressivism for 100 years has said we need a clerisy, a small clerisy of experts to regulate and manage the bovine masses who do not know how to conduct their lives. This is a tutorial we're getting this week in the progressive spirit.
Look, it undermines the president's credibility even further. It undermines the central element of the Democratic Party, that a government is honest and transparent and can get things done well. It undermines their faith, frankly, in the media, which to a large degree has been giving this whole issue a pass. When, you know, lie is a lie is a lie is a lie. When, you know, lie is a lie is a lie is a lie. This is not only a lie, but it's insulting to the American people to say that we're stupid. And yes, it's going to affect the president's ability to be able to have any credibility with the public and defend this law.
Take a listen to Nancy Pelosi now, then, and what Gruber said.
Mr. Gruber's comments were a year old, and he has backtracked from most of them. He's not even advocating the position that he was at some conference and said. So I don't know who he is. He didn't help write our bill.
Tax credits to small businesses. That, to be honest, is political. You gotta say you like small business in America or you're a communist. I'm biased here. It's like the one bit of the bill I actually wrote.
Our bill brings down rates. I don't know if you have seen Johnathan Gruber of MIT's analysis of what the comparison is to the status quo versus what will happen in our bill.
As the leader said today, Mr. Gruber played no role in drafting our bill. He's talked about specific writing of sections. He's been in the Oval Office with the creators as well as the president. What is going on here?
And she cited him, and now she claims she never heard of him. I think the moral of the story is if you're going to tell a lie on camera, make sure that there isn't a video that directly contradicts what you said coming out of your own mouth.
January 2012, he says employers not offering health insurance, that's not the end of the world. It's not clear why we even want employers in this game. If this whole thing ends up where employers drop their insurance and people go to the exchanges, so be it. That may be, quote, where the system needs to move.
Sure, the Affordable Care Act is, at bottom, an attempt to drive more and more people into the arms of the state. That is to dump more and more people into, if possible, Medicare and sometimes Medicaid in order to enlarge government control of our lives. That is the unchanging progressive agenda.
I think the biggest risk to this law right now is the Supreme Court because of what you said and what Gruber has backed up. I think it could be overturned by the Supreme Court. Lie is a lie is a lie is a lie.
The healthcare architect who has called American voters stupid has written in a format he finds specially designed for them, a comic book.
It's not a matter of, gee, people are too stupid to understand it. It's a matter of this is really hard for anyone to understand.
In it, Gruber portrays himself as a Clark Kent-type superhero, sitting between elephants and donkeys at the negotiating table, at other times fending off monster adversaries who shout, "It's a government takeover of insurance." Gruber is now facing some real-life adversaries. The RNC already producing an ad called #Grubering.
Johnathan Gruber is one of the most respected economists in the world.
Calls are increasing for him to testify in Congress.
And it'd be great to get him to come in and answer and give account for some of these things that he said about the American people.
Gruber's very bad week will continue. Tomorrow, the Massachusetts Health Connector, that state's failed Obamacare exchange, has to be relaunched. He sits on the board.
The Massachusetts Health Connector has arguably been the worst state-based exchange under Obamacare. Until today, they still do not have a functional website, and they've spent well over $250 million just to get ready to launch one tomorrow.
Asked this week how he would improve it, Gruber doubled down.
I think that basically move on exactly the way we've done it, which is you do massive outreach.
Logs show that Gruber visited the White House 8 times leading up to the passage of Obamacare. The White House blog heralds Gruber's work 5 different times. One headline reading, quote, "MIT economist confirms Senate health reform bill reduces costs and improves coverage." While millions of Americans face higher health care premiums, Fox has learned that Gruber is raking in millions from his health care consulting, and not just the $390,000 from the federal government. From his work for Michigan, Minnesota, Vermont, Wisconsin, and West Virginia, he pulled in $1.7 million. That does not include profits from this, the comic book.
Take a listen to Jay Carney on another channel speaking about this issue.
It doesn't help when someone who helped write not only Obamacare, the President's Affordable Care Act, but also the precursor to it, which was Governor Romney's health care reform initiative in Massachusetts, speaks from the ivory tower with remarkable hubris about the American voter and, by extension, the American Congress. And the fact is that any health care reform that sought to control costs and expand insurance would involve winners and losers. And that's always going to be the case. It's certainly the case. To speak that way, very harmful politically to the president.
Chuck?
I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but I agree 100% with what Jay Carney just said. The other thing Jay Carney said, and that was very interesting, was he noted that Gruber really was one of the architects of this plan, which is something people have been trying to
dispute, including Nancy Pelosi. By the way, $400,000 from the feds, but he made more than $1.5 million from different states contracting with them, and now adding insult to injury, Charles.
The liberal mind is that the experts understand the world, they have to dictate, they have the best interest of the masses who are benighted. You see it in the environmental movement. When they say science has spoken on climate change, you yahoos are too unintelligent to understand, and thus you have to do X, Y, and Z on your economy. It's the essence of liberal arrogance, and now we see it expressed openly.